Air Zoo Museum houses many historic and rare aircraft. It is named the Air Zoo since many of the planes have animal names like Warhawk, Goonie Bird, Wildcat, Blackbird, Bearcat, and Cobra. The display area covers 210,000 square feet. The museum has over 100 aircraft on display that cover the earliest days of flight to the present day. The museum not only preserves and displays historical aircraft and artifacts, it also serves as an educational facility that explores their history, development, and use over 120 years of flight. This is the SR-71 Blackbird. It had a top speed of 2,200 miles per hour. It has held the world record for speed since 1976. In fact, it can even outrun a missile. The powerful engines developed 70,000 pounds of thrust and could climb the craft at over 2 miles per minute. It flew at 3 times the speed of sound at an altitude of 85,000 feet. The F-71 Tomcat was a supersonic fighter. It was fitted with an M61 Vulcan Gatling gun. It was developed in 1965 and fires 20mm rounds. It is based on the Civil War rotary gun that could fire 200 rounds per minute. The M61 fires 6,000 rounds per minute. It can be used on land, air, and at sea. It was nicknamed the Hand of God. The Bell Sea Cobra is an attack helicopter. It saw extensive use as a gunship in the Vietnam War. The Air Cobra was a World War II fighter. It was powered by a massive, center-mounted 12-cylinder engine. It produced 2,900 horsepower. The Mitchell B-25 was a World War II medium bomber and first flying gunship. This configuration was armed with 8 .50 caliber machine guns in the nose and more around the aircraft. It is most famous for the Doolittle raid in 1942. The raid was in response to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. 16 B-25s bravely and with great skill were flown off of an aircraft carrier. Their target was Tokyo. The attack was a morale booster for the troops and the American citizens. The Corsair was a carrier-based fighter. The folded wing design aided in staging them on aircraft carrier decks. The P-47 Thunderbolt was a high-altitude fighter armed with 8 .50 caliber machine guns. The FM-2 Wildcat was the first fighter to see action in the Pacific Theater. Its engine produced 1,350 horsepower. Just to the right is the C-47 troop transport. One use was transporting paratroopers. It would also tow Waco gliders for larger troop drops. Each glider would be tethered to a C-47. As they approached the drop zone, the glider would be released, land, and troops deploy. Others would jump from the glider and join the other troops on the ground. This area features the early days of aviation. Beginning in 1930, Waco also produced aircraft for training pilots. Snoopy and his Sopwith Camel is an iconic image of World War I. The Air Zoo has one on display showing the wooden airframe. The biplane was originally used for reconnaissance. It was not long before it was used in combat. Early methods were crude. At first, machine guns were mounted over the wings so as not to shoot off the propeller. Soon, the machine gun was synchronized with the propeller. This allowed for more accuracy and began the era of the dogfight. Soon, these planes were used for less than precision bombing and were equipped with rockets. The end of the war was the beginning of the air show. Some planes, like the Air Mystery Ship, were built for air racing. The original is on display at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. These shows drew thousands of spectators. Daredevils were an additional attraction. Newsreel cameras brought the thrill to millions in theaters. Planes like the Texaco No. 13 popularized air travel. Perhaps the most recognized symbol of early passenger flight was the Ford Trimotor. Production began in 1925. It was one of the first all-metal aircraft. The Trimotor was an instant commercial success. It carried up to 13 passengers and a crew of 3. Early versions had wicker chairs. While it was close quarters, everyone did have a window seat. Passengers could even talk to the pilot and were often invited to sit in the co-pilot's seat. Despite being noisy and cramped, the Ford Trimotor was flown by over 100 airlines. A short distance from the main museum is the Flight Discovery Center. It includes additional aircraft and the restoration workroom. The Grumman is an amphibious aircraft. It was first manufactured in 1946. Aircraft that could not be flown to the restoration center were issued special permits and towed. An example is this F-117 Nighthawk. The Nighthawk was a stealth attack aircraft. The faceted angled surfaces gave it low visibility on radar. It had a single pilot and sophisticated navigation and attack systems. It could drop 2,000-pound laser-guided bombs. The bomb bay can be viewed up close at the museum. The Air Zoo Restoration Center is recognized as world-class. It is affiliated with the Smithsonian Institute. It brings old and damaged planes back to their original condition. An example is the Douglas SBD. It was carrier-based and served as a scout plane and dive bomber during World War II in the Pacific. During the war, many crashed into Lake Michigan while on training missions and were recently recovered. This is significant because the SBDs played a key role in winning the war against Japan. They were the most effective dive bomber of the war. They would take off from a carrier, dive directly at the enemy ship, and release their bombs. They were effective and deadly. While many SBDs were recovered from the lake, the one restored by the Air Zoo was the last known SBD-1 in existence. It arrived in bad shape. A team of volunteers spent thousands of hours restoring the aircraft to its original 1940 condition. 5 years after its arrival at the Restoration Center, the last surviving SBD-1 now sits proudly at the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum. A later version, an SBD-3, is on display at the museum. Not only does the Air Zoo display beautifully restored aircraft, it also has a section devoted to the history of space travel. Air travel has captivated people since the first flight by the Wright Brothers. New developments in aviation followed rapidly. What was once thought to be impossible is now exciting the imagination as to what the future may hold.